side of the sea into the country of Gadarenes. When he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had his dwelling among the tombs. And no one was able to bind him anymore, even with the chain, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. And no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains, and gnashing himself with stones. Go down to verse 15. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed sitting down, clothed, and in his right mind. The very man who had the legion, they became frightened. Those who had seen it described to them how it had happened to the demon-possessed man and all about the swine. They began to implore him to leave their region. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. And he, meaning Jesus, did not let him, but he said to him, "Go to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he had mercy on you." Verse 20. And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. And everyone was amazed. Can you say amen? Amen. And I'd like to use for a sermon subject today, trusting God to kick the devil out. Come on. All right. Trusting God to kick the devil out. It's been a rough week. It's been a rough week in our communities, in our neighborhoods, in our nation, in our world, as we witnessed the murders of two African-American males that were stopped by police officers. One in Baton Rouge, another in Minnesota. And then unfortunately, we witnessed the murders and killings of 5 police officers in the Dallas area, one being a resident of Port Arthur. During this week, we have witnessed social injustice and unrest, and many are wondering what in the world is going on. But I have some good news, and I would like to share that with you. The devil loses in the end. Yes. If I don't have anything else to say, I think we got a lot to munch on. But I also recognize that unfortunately, after the police shootings and the retaliation that ensued, I began to recognize, what does the Word of God say about these things? And the Word of God says clearly in Ephesians chapter 6 that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, spiritual wickedness in high places. So it causes me to recognize that although we may think that we are fighting against renegade and racist police officers, or we may think that we are fighting against a corrupt system, in actuality, we are fighting the devil in high places. And what begins to happen, ladies and gentlemen, is we begin to put our focus on people, and the real enemy often goes unnoticed and untouched. For many of us, we find ourselves fighting folk when we should be fighting the devil. And when we put our emphasis on fighting people, the enemy is in the background laughing and giggling because we are fighting people and retaliating against police and retaliating against other people. But in actuality, the battle is not a physical battle, but the battle is a spiritual battle. And as long as we fight a spiritual battle with carnal weaponry, we will always lose. You cannot fight a spiritual devil by cussing and shooting and stabbing and robbing and killing. But the way that you fight a spiritual battle is on your knees. It's a little old school, it's a little old fashioned, and many people want to do all of these type of things. And I am not against crusading. I am not against protesting. We must stand for social injustice. We must stand as African Americans, as men and women all across this country. We must stand for what's right. But I will also tell you that it is the job loved ones that's hooked on dip, but the one that's hooked on dip can't hear you because it is a spirit. You understand what I'm saying? For many of us, we are trying to wonder why in the world our loved ones are hooked on prescription pills. It is not the pills, it is a spirit. And until we begin, I know you're going to get quiet right there, but until we begin to recognize that it is a spiritual battle, we will always find ourselves losing in the end. It makes no difference how many people are killed, how many people are murdered, if you do not stand on the spiritual aspect and understand that we are not fighting flesh and blood, but we are fighting spiritual wickedness in our place. My heart has been grieved as yours. When you recognize that the person sitting on the side of you could have been in that car. The wonderful baby that is getting christened today, that young child could have been the one sitting in the back seat watching their daddy die. This is tough stuff to deal with. But I got good news. The devil loses in the end. Since I'm in the good news selling business, I got some more good news. God is still on the throne. Jesus reigns. The Bible says, I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praise shall continuously be in my mouth. I refuse to allow the enemy to steal my joy and my peace. I'm not gonna drive my car wondering if I'm gonna live if I get stopped by the police. Because Paul said to live is Christ and to die is gain. No matter what happens to me, we win in the end. Do I have one that can testify along with me that Jesus wins? I tell you, when I saw what happened in Baton Rouge, called my wife, called little George. We talked about it for hours at a time. And before we were able to really go to sleep good, had another one that happened in Minnesota.
That's right.
If I understand correctly, there was something else that happened earlier this morning. What happens when your world is in complete chaos? And I do say world because we see that there's financial crisis in Britain that is affecting what is our currency here in America. Lord, I don't know who you're going to vote for the presidency. I've said it before. Someone asked me, are you right wing or if you're left wing? I said, I support both wings so that the whole bird can fly. But I tell you, I don't know who you're going to vote for your president. But I got some more good news. No matter who sits in the Oval Office. Come on. No matter who sits in the White House. It doesn't, in the end of 4 years, we must vote for another president. But I will tell you that God sits comfortably in his own White House. And he cannot be impeached. He can't be voted in. And he can't be voted out. He can't be moved, but he's also immovable. I'm talking about the Lord my God. And the same God that sits on the throne is the God that is in control of our situation. Somebody yell to the top of your voice, God, kick the devil out. God, kick the devil out. In our text today, we see that Jesus is now going into the other side of the country, into the place called the Gadarenes in the King James Version. In other versions it says the Gerasenes. And as soon as Jesus gets off of the boat, he is met by a man. The text says in verse 2, when he got out of the boat, immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. In other words, there was a man that was possessed by the devil. I don't want you to think that what's happening in our country is not demon possessed, or that people are not possessed with the devil. I know you don't really like to talk about it, and I know it makes you a little uncomfortable. But even though you're a little uncomfortable about it, the reality remains. And this man that we see is possessed by the devil. The text says that the man was living in the tombs. So the first thing I see, he was living in a dead place. So what happened, this demon possessed man was now isolated from his family. He is now living, instead of living comfortably in homes and towns, he's now living in the tombs. The text goes on to say that he had his dwelling among the tombs. and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain. So this man, as Matthew's account says, that this man not only lived in the tomb, but he was also naked in the tomb. And they tried to subdue him. They tried to put chains around him, but the demon was so strong that he began to break the chains. We see some of our loved ones that may have experimented with either synthetic marijuana or dip, and we think that it's the dip that's giving them supernatural strength, but I say that it's a demon. And the text says that they had often been bound with shackles and chains. But the chains had been torn apart and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Then the text goes on to say, look at the plight of this man. Constantly, day and night, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains. I would tell you that for some of us, some of the challenging things that we have in our lives, nobody really knows the real pain that you go through. That's right. This man was not screaming in public, but he was screaming in private. He was screaming among the tombs. And the Bible goes on to say that he was cutting himself with stones. Some of the worst damage that someone can do is not what somebody else does, it's the damage you do yourself. Yes, right. Yes. Have you ever dashed yourself with stones? Cutting yourself over something that happened 35 years ago, you're still cutting yourself. Someone had an abortion and you haven't gotten over the fact that you had an abortion and you're cutting yourself. I'm going to make you feel uncomfortable today. You just sit there and take it today. You're cutting yourself. And this demon-possessed man was living in the tombs. He could not be bound with chains, and he's cutting himself, screaming day and night and cutting himself with stones. But then he sees Jesus. But I will tell you that when he sees, before I deal with the fact that he saw Jesus, I'd like to tell you what Jesus had to go through in order to get to the man.
Yeah, come on.
Because in Mark chapter 4, verses 35 through 41, Jesus tells the disciples, let us go to the other side. And as they enter into a boat to go to the other side, they are encountered with a storm. And the storm, as we would count that Jesus is in the back, he's sleeping on a pillow. And when Jesus got up out of his sleep, he rebuked the wind and the waves and said, peace, be still. The same word that he used to rebuke the wind is the same word that he used to cast the devil out in Mark chapter 1. Is there a possibility, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that the storm was originated from the devil to keep Jesus from getting to the man? Could it be possible that this storm came from the devil, not just to destroy Jesus and the disciples, but to keep Jesus from getting to the man? But then he saw Jesus. So if he saw Jesus, it means that Jesus came through the storm. I want to tell somebody in the building today that it makes no difference if Jesus has to go through to get to you. He'll go through the storm. He'll go through the wind. He'll go through the rain. He'll go through death. He'll go through death to get to you. What did Jesus have to go through in order to get to you? Some of you were drunk on a bar stool when Jesus came to you. Some of you had some sweets in your mouth before Jesus, and I ain't talking about candy. Some of you were drunk off liquor, but Jesus said, no matter what I gotta go through, I am gonna get to you. And I don't preach, I didn't preach that, so I got a lot to say. See, I don't know what he had to go through to get to you. Jesus said, I'm going through a storm to get this man. I'll go through a wind to get this man. I'll hang, bleed, and die in order to get mankind. It makes no difference what the enemy throws his way. Jesus is bad enough, bodacious enough to go through any storm, any situation, any decadence, any problem in order to get to you. I am so glad, I don't know about you, but I am so glad that he took all of the time, pain, and effort in order to get to little old me. And before you start thinking that you all that, Because I know you're looking good, smelling good, wig sitting right, perfume sitting right. But I want you to know something. You ain't always been who you are right now. But Jesus came to me anyhow. Somebody say he came to me anyhow. Oh, you didn't say it like that. Say he came to me anyhow. Demon-possessed man that could not be bound with chains and shackles, and he was cutting himself and screaming day and night when he saw Jesus. Sex says in verse 6, he ran up and bowed down. Interesting that the man that had the demon knew who Jesus was, and the Pharisees who were teaching about the law didn't even recognize who Jesus was. Could it be possible that the devil know more about your God than you do? Get quiet if you want to. I'm still going to preach. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down. And shouting and with a loud voice, he said, "What business do we have with each other, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" The demon-possessed man knew who Jesus was. And he went to Jesus and said, "Jesus, what business do we have with one another?" Jesus, why are you coming dealing with me right now? I'm the man on this turf. Jesus, what business do we have with each other? I got your lesbian daughter. Jesus, what you doing? Why we got business with one another? Yeah, Jesus, I got your son and he's smoking wet, he's smoking crack. I got him bound up. What business do we have with each other? I got your son confused about his sexuality. Jesus, what business do we have? I'm a man around here. This is my church. This is my man. Jesus, what business do we have? Jesus, I got your church divided. What business do we have? Jesus, what business do we have? What business do we have? I got this man cutting on himself. I got the man, I gave him strength. You couldn't give him strength. I gave him strength to break all the chains and the fetters. What business do we have? Jesus, Son of the Most High God. I got your city tied up. What business do we have? And while we going around killing cops, the devil is still peeping around the corners and saying, "Jesus, I got your nation tied up." What business do we have? Jesus, Son of the Most High God. I beg you, do not torment me. The demon knew not only who Jesus was, but the demon said, "I'm tormenting the man. Don't you come and torment me." The text says, now, I want you to catch this. Are you still in your Bible? Don't put your Bible up. The verse says in verse 9, and Jesus was asking him, "What is your name?" And he said to him, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Understand, Jesus is not talking to the man. Jesus is talking to the spirit.
That's all right.
So when your loved one come in full of pills and full of dope and full of drugs and full of everything, and you trying to talk to your loved one, you are wasting your time talking to the loved one. You need to talk to the spirit. I'm going to make you uncomfortable.
That's all right.
Jesus, I'm not wasting time talking to the man. I'm going to talk to the spirit. And notice what this demon says. When Jesus says, "Identify yourself." Because you're not going to talk to me and you know my name. What's your name? You want to know my business? Let me know your. What is your name? He said, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Now, if you may not know, in the Bible days, a Roman army, they were identified by ranks. And one of the largest, if not the largest rank in the military in the Bible days was a legion of soldiers. In the Bible days, a legion was a minimum of 6,000 soldiers. Do you hear what I'm saying? So when this demon-possessed man identifies himself as legion, it may mean that there is at least a minimum of 6,000 demons in this man, or at the very least, there is an army in this man. You will never find in the text a devil fighting against the devil. You'll never find in the text where a principality fights against a principality. You'll never find in the text where devils fight against devils. It's only on this side when you have churches fighting against churches and pastors fighting against pastors. But on this side, there's division in the church, but there's unity in the world of the demonic.
Speak a word, sir.
My name is Legion, for we are many. This not your man, this is my man. I got him tied up. But look what Jesus says. And the devil, in verse 10, begins to implore him or beg him, don't send me out of the country. This legion says, you may send me out of the man, but don't send me out of the country. Because I got a good thing going on around here. This is my territory. If you send me out of the man, just don't send me out of the territory. As a matter of fact, I'll be more comfortable if you send me in the pigs, but just leave me in the region. And you want to know why there's so much crime in your city? You want to know why there's so much violence in your city? You want to know why there could be an innocent girl going to the store, get shot by an off-duty security guard at a gas station in your city on Jimmy Johnson? You know why it's like that? Because the devil thinks that he owns the city. But I got news for the devil. Somebody scream with a loud voice, God kick the devil out. God kick the devil out. Oh, y'all playing church saints. God kick the devil out. God kick the devil out. I want the devil out of my community. I want the devil out of my home. I want the devil out of my church. I want the devil out of your body. I want the devil out of your body. I want the devil out. Somebody say out. Now there was a large herd of pigs feeding on the mountain. The demon said, send us into the pigs so that we may enter them. People want to know why in the world they want to go into pigs. In the Bible days, pigs were known as unclean animals. So that seemed like the appropriate place for an unclean spirit. So what happens, the demons leave the man after Jesus gives them permission. The demons leave the man and enter into the swine or the pigs, and the pigs go down head first into the sea and drown themselves. On the further investigation, they did not go all at the same time, but the demons entered the pig to the point where one went in and then he drowned. Then the other went in and then he drowned. Then the other went in and he drowned. And there were 2,000 pigs that died. The herdsman ran and reported it to the people in the country. You may be wondering, why did the people go and report it? Why they not worried about the man? I'll tell you why. I'm glad you asked. I heard you. Because at that time, there was an illegal business going on called selling pigs. So Jesus, in one swoop, got a man healed and killed an illegal operation at the same time. Do you know that your God is so awesome and so amazing that he will heal the body and kill illegal transactions at the same time? They all went and said, later on it says, Jesus, you got to go. Because we're not really worried about the man, you messing with my money. And for most of us, we're not really concerned about other people, but when you mess with my money, hold on now. Old folks used to say, get your hand out my pocket. Jesus, you got to go. But when they came back, the text says, verse 15, when they came to Jesus, they observed the man who had been demon possessed. Now, I went to the greatest high school of all time, Abraham Lincoln High School, and I graduated from the greatest class of all time, class of 1994. Yes, I said it. Class of 1994 was the greatest class of all time, and I was taught by Miss Mary Layton. When I read the text and when it says that the man had been demon possessed, that tells me that's in the past tense. So even though the pigs were drowned, the man is now free. And I want to tell somebody that whom the Son sets free is free. And do I have any free people in the building today? I think if you're free, you ought to give them a free praise. I think you ought to give them glory. Don't clap your hands. But if you are free from the Son, you ought to give God all of the praise that you can lift up. I thought I had a little bit of that. You ought to have some free people on the inside. They are glad that Jesus set them free. Okay, you ought to have everybody here. But I'm glad that Jesus set you free. There are no more chains that are holding you. They observed the man sitting down chilling. He got some clothes on. Remember in Matthew's account, it says that he was screaming, cutting himself naked. But now he's clothed and in his right mind. My granny used to say, Mom, you remember Granny used to say, I'm glad that I'm in my right mind. It's a debilitating thing when you're not in your right mind. This man had been possessed by the devil to the point where it clouded his mind. When we try to figure out why some of our loved ones do some of the things they do, is because they are not in their right. And no matter how many rehabs you send them to, no matter how much you try to help them, until Jesus comes into their territory, they can never walk in a right mind. But I am so glad. If you take my strength, I'll still be all right. No one will push me around. If I lose some of my money, it ain't no big thing. I don't really care about money anyway. But God, don't let me lose my money. Are you glad that you got a right mind? See, now for some of us, we don't know what we ought to give God praise about. You giving God praise because you got a fancy house and a nice whip. But I'm giving God the praise because I got a right mind. He's sitting down, clothed and in his right mind. And the very man who had the legion, and the people became frightened. They weren't frightened when he was in the mountains and in the tomb. Because what people will do when you get in the jam, they'll put you in what they call isolation. But now this man is among them and they scared. And the text says, as Jesus, who had accomplished, I'm done preaching. Jesus, who had accomplished his goal. The text says he's now getting into the boat. But the Bible says that the man who had been demon possessed, we don't even know the man's name. He's nameless. Really doesn't matter what his name is, because I know who his name is. His name is Jesus. And Jesus says that the man wants to follow him. Let me come with you. But Jesus did not let him. But Jesus said, on the other hand, instead of you following me, I'm going to give you a missionary journey. I'm going to give you a missionary assignment.
Yes, God.
Go home to your people. Go home to your family. And tell them what great things the Lord has done for you. And how he has had mercy on you. And the man went away and proclaimed in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. I'm going to ask you a question. Has God done anything for you? Let me ask it a different way. Has God